Hello, Packers fans. Welcome into PackersNews.com. I'm Kassidy Hill, joined by Pete Dougherty. And Pete, Merry Christmas Eve.
Merry Christmas to you. You're looking casual and relaxed.
I am. Well, I'm sitting in my parents' dining room right now, and we're heading to my grandma's here in just a few minutes. Not right now. We're doing this right now, but in just a little bit here, we're heading to my grandma's for family Christmas. So, feeling definitely relaxed to be here in Alabama, where it is below freezing, but it is not near Green Bay right now.
It's when I got up and went out to finish the snow blowing from yesterday. This morning it was -7.
Oh, oh, okay,
That's
that's
cold.
rough.
That's cold.
Yeah, I wouldn't even know how to function.
Yeah.
Um, but no, I think we're like third in the 30s right here now in Alabama. And South, this is South Alabama. It's snowing in North Alabama.
Wow.
So yes, it is cold all over the country right now. Um, Pete, one place that won't be quite that cold this weekend is Miami. It's still going to be a little chilly for Miami in the 60s, but or in 50s and 60s, but not quite the normal, 70s and 80s that you expect when you're playing in South Florida. The Packers have practiced inside all week to probably because you have to if it's -7 outside,
Yeah.
but also because just to kind of get ready for Miami. Is this like best case scenario for them that it's going to for sure be warmer than Green Bay, but it's not going to be hot, and it might be a little chilly for those Dolphins players. Although they did play in Buffalo last week, and that
Yeah,
was pretty
and
good.
50. I think it's a big break for the Packers because 55 is really moderate, and I think it was. I'm trying to remember what year the Packers played down. It was either in. I can't remember now if it was in Tampa or Miami. Might have even been Jacksonville. But it
Hmm.
was late in the season, and the temperature was like 71 or 72 degrees, and it was in December if I remember right. And after the game, T.J. Lang said that was the most exhausted he'd ever been after a game because he had come from like 0 degree, weather up here, really, really cold. 70 degrees felt like, 95 would if it were September.
Right.
So if it were 70 in the low 70s on this trip, that would be the Packers would have some real heat issues that you wouldn't have if it were September, October. So yeah,
Hmm.
I think long story short, I think they caught a break there.
The big news of the day, though, Pete, and I think our friend Randy has even mentioned it here. The Packers have signed Elton Jenkins to his contract extension. I know our colleague Tom Silverstein said a couple of weeks ago that was five one of the five most important things they needed to do before the season was over. Just how crucial is it now that they have Elton Jenkins signed back to a long-term deal?
It's big, and that's probably the reason why, if you remember, they restructured Dean Lowry's contract a few weeks ago.
Hmm.
It didn't create a lot of room, but it added like an extra million or something like that to their cap room. And I'm sure this was the reason why was, they could just put a little more money into this year and take a little off of next year's cap because they're going to have cap issues again next year. So yeah, it's really big. He struggled. Jenkins struggled early. When playing tackle, coming back from that ACL, he was
Hmm.
not the same guy, but he's been playing better. And then when they moved him to guard, that helped a lot too. And it's really, I think it's pretty common for guys coming off ACLs. They almost all say it that it's that second season back is where they feel like the same player they were before they got hurt.
Hmm.
So I would assume next year, he'll be feeling better, moving better. I think that has to do with the nerves have to regenerate in the knee because the new ACL doesn't have any nerves, and you can't speed that process up. It just takes time. So he'll still provide that versatility he did in the past, which he's really uncommon that way. He can play any of the five spots, but it does look like guard is his best spot. So I would have to think that they'll do everything they can to keep that guard.
As you just said, guard is his best spot, but someone who can play across the line. We've all kind of agreed that we don't think David Bakhtiari will be back next year. If David Bakhtiari is not back, can Elton Jenkins become the cornerstone of your line, and can you build around him?
Yeah, I mean it's he's a guard. He's not a tackle, but he's a really good guard, and you need good guards because there are the Aaron Donalds of the world you have to deal with. So it's and it helps with the inside zone run to have a run. Jenkins is a really good run blocker. So yeah, he's a cornerstone guy. Yeah, I've been of the opinion like you that Bakhtiari will be gone, but it's not a given. He'll agree to a little bit of a pay cut or restructure. I mean, I don't think he would to at least a pay cut, but you never know. So we'll see this offseason. If I still had to bet, I'd bet that they'll part ways. But you never know. Maybe the medical staff has seen something where they think he's past the worst of it, and there's always that chance that the Packers try to bring him back because he is playing good football when he's out there, and he just hasn't been out there a lot now, at least because of the appendectomy, not because of the knee.
Levi, I see your question about Tunyon. We're going to come back to that. But while we're still in this conversation about Bach, Frank asked, isn't it a massive cap hit to cut Bach?
No, they pick up $6 or $7 mil in cap room.
They'll pick up room.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, the numbers that apply to this year but not this year, they get a little confusing. So
yeah, it gets
all
all
you keeping up with it.
It is. It's really arcane, and but they pick up they could pick up similar amount of room if they restructured, but then you're taking the risk of you're paying a guy. I think his total pay next year is going to be like 18 million, 19 million, something like that. And you're risking paying a lot of money to a guy who could end up missing games. You don't know until an hour and a half before kickoff each week whether he's going to be okay to play. At least that's how it was for this year, earlier this year.
And, it felt like towards the end of this year, he had figured out how to work the knee, how to practice, how to get ready, how to ramp up so that he could play a full game. He played 100% of the snaps the previous 4 games before his appendectomy. I think it was the previous 4. It may have been previous 2. He had played. He had gotten to where he was playing 100% of snaps.
Yeah.
And then he had the appendectomy. So it's not necessarily even the knee anymore. But I said this on our Green 19 podcast yesterday. At this point, it just feels like Murphy's Law with Bakhtiari. If something can go wrong, it will.
And I think it just seems like just watching this over the years. When the really serious knee injuries, and an ACL is serious, but this was worse. This had a lot of other collateral damage. He's had where you need multiple surgeries like he has for this one injury. It seems like there's often a lot of issues that crop up after that. Hip issues, arthritis in the knee, problems with the other leg, because all these things affect your body movements and your gait and all those things. So it's just a lot of times this is beginning, or back issues. This is the beginning of a cascade of injury problems. Not always, but it seems like more often than not when the injuries are this serious. These are all the things, the Packers and their medical staff and their front office have to think about when making this call. I'm trying to think of how old Bakhtiari is. I can't remember off the top of my head. I think he's maybe 31?
Yeah, he's early 30s, I think.
Yeah, 31, maybe 32. So, those linemen often can play really well until 34, 35, 36. But like we saw with Brian Bulaga, who had multiple serious injuries, he started having back problems, and it just, he signed with the Chargers. He ended up missing a bunch of games, playing for them out there. It's just really, you have to manage these injuries. And so I would think for the rest of his career, Bakhtiari will have to do a lot of management just to, make sure that he's healthy enough to get on the field each week.
As you said, these injuries can kind of hang around for a while, and most ACLs don't even fill themselves until 2 years later. So Levi says, Bobby Tunyon has no juice left. He does nothing after the catch. They need a real threat at tight end. Pete, do you attribute some of that to the fact that he's still, a year off an ACL tear? Or is this just sort of who he is, and do the Packers need to look elsewhere? Because his contract will be done after this year. That's what
Levi's right. He just doesn't look as good after the catch. He was always, a little stiff, but he's looking stiffer now. He catches the ball really well, and he can run straight line, but the wiggles, there's just not much there. So I agree with Levi there. I don't know the answer to your question, how much better he'll be next year than this year. He's not the youngest guy. I think he's 28, so it's not like he's just a kid. So I'm not sure if he'll be a little better next year or quite a bit better. But tight end is a huge need for the Packers regardless.
And if he had another year left on his deal, it's worth it for the Packers to see if he can, be himself again. But when he's going to be done after this year and a free agent, is it worth the Packers to re-sign him and sort of take that chance?
Well, I guess it could be. All the other teams are seeing the same video and game tape, so maybe his market just won't be there, and maybe they can get him at a price where, a small guarantee, but if they ended up feeling like they needed to cut him, that they'd be okay with that. It just depends what his market will bear, come March. You see that with some guys, if they're going to make a lot of money and they don't re-sign with their original team before the start of free agency. So if let's say it starts March 15th, if they're not signed by March, 14th or 15th, and they hit the market, they're gone. But there are guys who, the team has a price where they'll take them back. And, if the guy goes and tests the market and if he doesn't like what's out there, they sometimes end up re-signing again. So that could always be a possibility with him, just like, maybe with Adrian Amos, it could be a similar situation.
Mm-hmm. There's a few free agents coming up this next season or this next all season. RS Electron asks, what if quarterback one wants Bach back next season? But I'm going to extend that outwards to include Cobb, Lazard, Mercedes Lewis, a couple of these other guys. If you're the Packers, do you acquiesce to Rodgers again on, okay, we want you back, so we'll bring this guy back too? And Randall Cobb is the one I'm really thinking of. And we can't overstate what Randall Cobb provides to that room just from an experience standpoint. And, hey, we've seen this year that third and Cobb is still pretty on the money. But we also know that this wide receiver room has a bright future. So I guess what I'm asking is, and not just Cobb, but others too, are you still at that point where you have to acquiesce to Rodgers, or you're like, we know we're only going to get one more, maybe 2 more years out of you at most, maybe not even that. So we're going to go ahead and start building our roster for the future.
That's the way I would do it, or hope that I would do it if I were in charge, that I would just, they got to do what they got to do. And you can't, all these older players, and they've played such good football for you, but this is life in the NFL. And you got to move on from guys. It's just the way it is. And you got to bring in younger guys who have upside. So if I'm the Packers and I feel that, the best thing for the team is to move on from any or all three of those guys, then I would do it. And, you would just have to hope that, Rodgers has been around for a long time. He's got to understand that, he's seen, a couple generations of players come and go while he's been in this locker room. So what will they do? I think now that the contract is signed and he's down to the very end, I think your point was right, that he's down to the last year or two probably. So I think he's lost a lot of the overall leverage that he would have had for last year was at the max for his leverage when he got the new contract and for having a say in things. I think he's, some of that he loses a little bit now that he's down to next year is his last guaranteed season in his contract. So I don't know what you think there, but I would do if I were the Packers, I'd do what I have to do and just let him know ahead of time and discuss it with them, so he knows what's coming. Mm-hmm. And I would do what I had to do.
I like this question from Frank. Is there a chance to move Lazard to tight end?
I just don't know how willing the guy would be to do it. If his heart's not in it, mm-hmm. I'm not sure I'd want to do it. He's a good blocker for a receiver. He'd probably be a, not so good blocker compared to tight ends. It's an interesting question. Teams, it's been a question with him since he came out. A lot of teams thought he should go to tight end, but he's been playing receiver so much. They kind of use him as a tight end anyway, and they can play him in the slot. I don't think I would.
And he's not going to agree to it because then he gets paid as a tight end and not a receiver.
Yeah, and I just don't, if the guy, it's not like he has to make the move to keep his career going. Mm-hmm. And I just don't think he'd be very enthusiastic about it. So, if a guy really doesn't want to do it, I don't think you're going to get the best out of him. So I don't think I would, but you never know mm-hmm. the Packers or some other team might have in mind for him.
We're going to take a couple of final questions here. This one looking to Miami. Antoine says, Hill and Waddle are real threats for Jair and Douglas. Will they be able to hold their own? Pete, I wrote about this last night. I think it'll be on PackersNews.com today. And Jair told me, I thought this was really interesting. He was brutally honest. He was like, he essentially said, Tyreek Hill has a speed you can't match. And so you just have to find other ways to mess with him. You have to throw him off the line as much as you can. And then he essentially said, there's going to be times you just straight up get beat. Like he said, I don't want to say he's unstoppable, but you can't defend that speed. And he said, so there's going to be times he beats you. And when that happens, you have to depend on your help over the top. That's been an issue with them, especially when they're playing zone, is that pass off. When Jair has to go pass a guy off to Adrian or to Rudy or to Darnell Savage, who's not going to be in there anymore. That's been where things have gotten lost in communication. And so I understand against a quarterback like Tua and against this offense, you would think you would want to play zone. But when you also have guys this speedy, can you take that risk with the personnel you have on the Packers defense?
Yeah, these guys are a problem because Waddle's really fast too. I was looking up his 40 time, and it was anywhere from 4.32 to 4.
Yeah, they're all fast.
Yeah, 4.32, I think. And Mostert is 4.32 to 4.38, and he's a running back. So they're going to want to keep two safeties deep all day. But then Mostert might just carve them up. Their run defense hasn't been very good this year. So this team is a real problem.
Right.
And that speed is a big issue. And that's why you and I both picked the Miami Dolphins to win this football game.
Yeah, that speed can just strike at any time from anywhere on the field.
Yeah.
Last thing here, Pete, before we sign off, I see a couple of different questions in here. One from Levi, one from Jim, all talking about Keyshawn Nixon. Does it feel like he's going to break one off before the end of the season? And just how big of a difference has he made to this team?
It sure does, doesn't it? I mean, you were saying that a week or two ago that you thought he was on the brink, and it sure looks like it. And he's made a huge difference. He's just think of that return he had in the fourth quarter, or maybe it was the end of the third quarter last week, and he got tackled right by the Packers bench, and those guys just mobbed him. Here, the Rams score a touchdown, and the next play, all the momentum's back with the Packers because of his big return. I think he's made a huge difference. I was talking with Ron Wolf yesterday, former Packers GM, about this, and he had Desmond Howard. Wolf had never really put that much into return guys up until then. They're always thinking position player first, returning second. And he signed Howard to be a return guy, and Howard kept Howard. And Howard had a huge season, and it was big in the playoffs. And Wolf said, sometimes you got to be hitting the head by a 2x4 to realize the things you got to do. Mm-hmm. And I kind of think this is the 2x4 to the head moment for Brian Gutekunst, where, I think they have to re-sign Nixon. And plus, he's a decent backup corner too.
Right, and a good nickel too. Pete, I know you and I will not be in Miami this weekend. Spoon and Ryan will. Because it is on Christmas Day, coverage is going to look a little different. Pete and I will have our post-game Facebook Live, but, we don't expect you all to be there. Go spend time with your families. But if you do come join us, we would love to spend time with you. Our podcast is going to actually be the next day, and there will be no pregame Facebook Live. Spend as much time as you can with your family. Pete, you go do the same this weekend, and have a very Merry Christmas.
Yeah, Merry Christmas to you too, Kassidy.
Bye, guys. Thank you.